Welcome to part 3 of the 8 Parts of Speech lesson series. In this lesson, we're going to look at pronouns, which makes sense since we just covered nouns in the last lesson. So what is a pronoun? A pronoun is a word that takes the place of a noun or a phrase. So a pronoun can refer to a noun or a phrase that has already been mentioned, typically within the same sentence or the same paragraph. And we call that noun or phrase the antecedent. A pronoun can also refer to a noun or a phrase that does not need to be named specifically. So pronouns like nobody or anybody, they're standing in for a group of people that we don't actually have to define in the sentence or paragraph or possibly even in the entire written piece. So, can you name any words that are pronouns? Just pause the video for a second and see how many you can come up with. Give yourself 10, 20 seconds, and when you're ready, come back. So here's a bunch of pronouns. This is not a complete list, but these are some of the more common pronouns. He, she, it, my, they, we, their, I, her, our, his. As I also mentioned, words like somebody or anybody are considered pronouns. People often forget about those. They tend to remember these that I've got listed. So pronouns help our writing and our speech to flow better. In English, we feel like things sound really clunky if we only use nouns. And to show you what I mean, we're going to look at some song lyrics and see how clunky this song becomes with no pronouns. So hopefully you're familiar with the song Hey Jude by the Beatles. If you're not, take a quick break and listen to the song and then come back. It's a great song. So the lyrics start, hey Jude, don't make it bad. But if we're taking out all the pronouns and changing them to nouns, look at what happens. Hey Jude, don't make circumstances bad. Take a sad song and make the sad song better. Remember to let the unknown woman into Jude's heart. Then Jude can start to make circumstances better. This song is just not sounding good, is it? Hey Jude, don't be afraid. Jude was made to go out and get the unknown woman. The minute Jude lets the unknown woman under Jude's skin, then Jude begins to make circumstances better. And anytime Jude feels the pain, hey Jude, refrain. Don't carry the world upon Jude's shoulders. For well Jude knows that it's a fool who plays things cool by making the fool's world a little colder. I mean, man, that just doesn't work as a song, does it? Oh gosh, I made a beetle cry. So pronouns are very important. They make things sound better. It just gets very unpleasant and repetitive if you keep having to repeat the nouns. I'm going to give you 2 sentences. Let's see if you can find all the pronouns in these 2 sentences. And do pause the video if you need to. So here's our first sentence. They have been best friends for 14 years. And our other sentence, her bedroom is so messy that it gives her mother nightmares. So real quick, find all the pronouns. If you need to pause, go ahead and pause. And we're going to go over the answers in just a second. All right, so what are the answers? They have been best friends for 14 years. So that sentence had 1 pronoun. And our second sentence, her bedroom is so messy that it gives her mother nightmares. So 3 pronouns in that sentence. Well, now let's look at a sample passage and see if we can figure out which noun each pronoun is referring back to. In other words, which noun is each pronoun standing in for? Jody really enjoys listening to true crime podcasts before bed at night. She finds it relaxing, but her husband thinks she's nuts. He can't imagine how listening to detailed accounts of brutal murders could be at all relaxing to anyone. So we've got multiple pronouns in this sentence. First, let's go through and let's highlight all the pronouns. So look through. Oh, here's a pronoun, she. It, there's another one. Her, she's, he, and there's one more pronoun. Can you find it? Anyone. All right, so we have located 6 pronouns. Now let's match each of these pronouns to the noun that it's replacing. So starting with she, what word is she replacing? She is replacing Jody. So if we didn't use the word she, we would have to start this sentence with Jody. So you would have 2 sentences in a row that start with the word Jody. It'd be a little bit repetitive. Now, what about it? What is it replacing? Our second pronoun. Well, it is actually standing in for an entire phrase. Remember, pronouns can do that. Our entire phrase is listening to true crime podcasts. So if we had not used the word it here, we would have to repeat that entire phrase a second time. And again, that would sound very repetitive and clunky, and it'd be a little bit irritating to read when it's that repetitive. It makes the writing really boring. Now our next pronoun, her. What word is her replacing? Here again, Jody. It's replacing the possessive form of Jody, which would be Jody's. She's, in other words, she is. What's that replacing? That again is replacing Jody. Because imagine how that would sound, but Jody's husband thinks Jody's nuts. Again, repetitive. And repetitive's not necessarily a horrible thing. It's just it's not considered quality writing when your writing gets really repetitive. So now let's look at he. What word is he replacing? He is replacing husband. And finally, our last pronoun, and this one's a little bit tricky. What is anyone standing in for? If you look, there's nothing in this sentence and nothing in this paragraph that anyone is referring back to. So anyone is actually referring to a noun or phrase that does not need to be named specifically. Remember, that's one of the things that a pronoun can refer to. So if we didn't use the word anyone, we maybe could say something like, he can't imagine how listening to detailed accounts of brutal murders could be at all relaxing to the people who exist in the world. See, that would be kind of clunky sounding. Anyone just sounds better to us. Let's look at some rules for using pronouns. When you are using a pronoun, first of all, make sure it's obvious who or what the pronoun is referring to. So if you are replacing a noun or a phrase with a pronoun, make sure that you have actually used that noun or phrase recently. For the sake of your GED essay, make sure you've used it sometime within that same paragraph. Possibly, the previous sentence or at the beginning of the sentence you're writing. Make sure it's really obvious who or what this pronoun is referring to. And be very, very careful if you're starting a sentence with the word it. A common mistake I see people make is they start a sentence with it, but it's not super obvious what that it is actually replacing. What noun or phrase is it standing in for? Also, make sure if you're talking about multiple people or multiple things and then you use a pronoun, take a look at it, read over it again, and make sure it's really obvious which of those your pronoun is referring back to. Do not start a paragraph with a pronoun, use the noun instead. Now, if you go on to college or you're doing some creative writing for fun, you can sometimes break this rule. But for the sake of your GED essay, don't start any of your paragraphs with a pronoun. It's much better to start with a noun. It'll be much clearer. Pronouns need to match the nouns that they're referring to. So if you are replacing a singular noun, you need a singular pronoun. Like, let's say that you're writing about a woman named Diane. You would replace Diane with she or her. You wouldn't replace Diane with they or them. That is a plural pronoun, so that would be grammatically incorrect. But the English language has a little problem. The English language doesn't have a gender-neutral pronoun that's singular. Some languages do, English doesn't. So many people have started using they, them, or their as a gender-neutral singular pronoun, even though those are plural pronouns. So technically that's grammatically incorrect, but it's becoming so common, and because we don't have a gender-neutral pronoun that we can use, it's getting more and more accepted. For the sake of your GED essay, I would advise you not to do that. Some other options if you needed a gender-neutral singular pronoun, you could just do him/her, he/she, him or her, he or she. It's a little clunky, but it works. And if you use a plural noun, make sure that you replace it with a plural pronoun. So if you're talking about two people, then you're going to need to say they or them. Some rules for singular and plural pronouns. When a pronoun is replacing two or more nouns that are joined by the word and, you need to use the plural form of the pronoun. So usually if you're talking about people, that would be they or them. When a pronoun replaces two nouns that are joined together by or, nor, either or, neither nor, or not only but also, your pronoun needs to match the second noun. So if the second noun is singular, you're going to use a singular pronoun. If that second noun is plural, use a plural pronoun. And our last rule here is the trickiest one. When a pronoun is replacing a collective noun, use a singular pronoun if the noun is thought of as a single unit. Use a plural pronoun if the noun is thought of as separate people or things. All right, if you're wondering what on earth is a collective noun is a word used for a group of people or things. The word team, for example. Team refers to a group of people that are doing something together. Or a word like herd, like a herd of cattle. Or the collective noun for a group of crows is actually murder, which cracks me up. A murder of crows. So when you're using a collective noun and then replacing it with a pronoun, you have to think about, is that collective noun thought of as one single unit, or do we think of it as separate people or things? A lot of collective nouns, even though they're referring to a group, we think of it as one thing. Like a team is a group of people. But there's one team, even though it's many people on it. So if we were using the word team in a sentence and we replaced it with a pronoun, we would actually use a singular pronoun if we're only talking about one team. Got it? This one can be tricky. So look at the verb to help if you aren't sure. If it's a phrase, look at the beginning words. But the verb will give you a clue as to whether or not this is plural or singular. Let's check, do these pronouns match their nouns? We're going to look to see if the pronoun in each sentence correctly matches its antecedent. Oh, do you remember what that word means? Antecedent. Antecedent is the noun or phrase that a pronoun refers to. Good vocabulary word to know. So our first sentence, Shauna couldn't fall asleep, so she decided to watch videos on YouTube for a while. She is our pronoun. So what is the antecedent for she? It is Shauna. So does Shauna match with she? Is Shauna singular or plural? Singular. Is she singular or plural? Singular. So yes, those match. That sentence is correct. Our second sentence, each member of the gymnastics team proudly held up their medal. So where's our pronoun? There. There is our pronoun. Now, what is there replacing? Each member of the gymnastics team. It's replacing a phrase. Now, is each member of the gymnastics team singular or plural? Well, this is a little bit tricky because team is a collective noun. But before that, at the beginning of our phrase, we've got each member, and member is a singular word. So each member held up their medal. That doesn't work because each member is a singular subject and there is a plural pronoun. How can we fix this? In this case, it's a girls' gymnastics team, so it should be her medal. I know that sounds weird because I think most people would say their medal in spoken English, but actually, to be grammatically correct, it should be her because member is singular. Let's do another exercise. So we've got a couple sentences here. Guillermo and Ricardo went to a soccer game together last weekend. He has been a soccer game since he was a child, but Ricardo just started following soccer recently, so he asked him several questions during the game. Fortunately, he didn't mind. Oi. So the person who wrote these sentences forgot about our first rule for using pronouns. Make sure it is obvious who or what each pronoun refers to. So we need to fix this. Let's start by locating all of our pronouns because we got a few too many in here. So he, here's another he, him, he. Now, having all these pronouns wouldn't be such a problem except our set of sentences has two people that it's talking about. Two guys, Guillermo and Ricardo. And so the he's and the hims need to obviously refer to either Guillermo or Ricardo, and at the moment, it's a bit confusing for the reader because this first he is actually referring to Guillermo, but the sentence before you were talking about two people and you suddenly go into a singular pronoun that's talking about one person. That kind of gives the reader whiplash. Now the second he is also referring to Guillermo. Our next he, though, refers to Ricardo. Then we have a him that refers to Guillermo and a he that refers to Guillermo. So this is a little bit of a mess. We need to eliminate a couple pronouns and put nouns back. So let's start by taking out that initial he because that was a problem, and we're going to put Guillermo in place because now this makes sense. Guillermo and Ricardo went to a soccer game together last weekend. Guillermo has been a soccer fan since he was a child, but Ricardo just started following soccer recently. So he asked him several questions during the game. Fortunately, he didn't mind. Ooh, you know what? That's still a little bit unclear. We got some more fixing to do. So, we started our second sentence with Guillermo to make it clear which of the guys we were talking about. And we know that this next he is referring back to Guillermo, so that's fine. But then we change our subject over to Ricardo. And we talk about how Ricardo just started following soccer recently, so that he very obviously refers to Ricardo, so that's okay. Asked him. Well, now we've bounced back to Guillermo. And that's a little unclear. So let's be nice to our reader. And let's change that him to Guillermo. Guillermo has been a soccer fan since he was a child, but Ricardo just started following soccer recently, so he asked Guillermo several questions during the game. That's a lot more clear. Much, much clearer. Fortunately, he didn't mind. Well, who didn't mind? I guess it must be Guillermo because he's the one getting asked questions. But we don't want to make our reader have to do guesswork, so let's make that a little more obvious. Now our sentences read, Guillermo and Ricardo went to a soccer game together last weekend. Guillermo has been a soccer fan since he was a child, but Ricardo just started following soccer recently, so he asked Guillermo several questions during the game. Fortunately, Guillermo didn't mind. Much, much better. All right, let's do one more exercise. Got ourselves a paragraph here. Lana and Keegan went out to dinner last night with Lana's parents. During dinner, Lana's mother asked Keegan when Keegan was finally going to propose to Lana's mother's daughter. Oh, dear heavens. Lana was so embarrassed when Lana's mother did that. Lana was also a little worried that this question would make Keegan uncomfortable. So imagine Lana's surprise when Keegan answered, "Tonight, actually." And then Keegan pulled out a ring and proposed. Keegan and Lana's mother had planned the whole thing in advance because Keegan and Lana's mother knew it would make Lana happy to have Lana's parents there for the proposal. So in this paragraph, we have the opposite problem. We've got too many nouns and not enough pronouns. As a result, rather than being confusing, this paragraph is clunky. So we need to change some of the nouns to pronouns to make it smoother. So, Lana and Keegan, well, we definitely need both of those nouns because we need our subjects, went out to dinner last night with Lana's parents. Now, we could change that to her, and most readers would be aware that Keegan's a guy, so her is probably referring to Lana. But it grammatically just doesn't really work. The reader could figure it out, but it's not really following the rules. So let's keep that first sentence the way it is. During dinner, Lana's mother asked Keegan when Keegan was finally going to propose to Lana's mother's daughter. Oi, that sentence has some issues. So Lana's mother asked Keegan when Keegan, well, that seems unnecessary to repeat Keegan's name. Let's say he. Lana's mother asked Keegan when he was finally going to propose to Lana's mother's daughter. Well, obviously, nobody would say that. So, how about her daughter? During dinner, Lana's mother asked Keegan when he was finally going to propose to her daughter. Oh, that's much better. Lana was so embarrassed when Lana's mother did that. Well, here again, we don't have to say Lana's name twice in the same sentence. So let's get rid of that second one. And the correct possessive would be her. Lana was also a little worried that this question would make Keegan uncomfortable, so imagine Lana's surprise when Keegan answered, "Tonight, actually." Now here again, we don't need to have Lana's name twice, because we already know she's the subject of the sentence. There's a couple ways that we could change this around. But I would say, since the last sentence started with the word Lana, let's not do 2 sentences in a row starting with Lana, because that gets repetitive. So let's start this one with she. She was also a little worried that this question would make Keegan uncomfortable. So imagine Lana's surprise when we don't have to say Keegan again. So let's put he. When he answered, tonight, actually. And then Keegan pulled out a ring and proposed. No errors found. Keegan and Lana's mother had planned for the whole thing in advance because Keegan and Lana's mother knew it would make Lana happy to have Lana's parents there for the proposal. Okay, so that final sentence needs some work. So Keegan and Lana's mother, we need both of them because they're both the subjects of this sentence. They're the plotters that put this whole thing in motion. But we don't need to repeat their names again later in the sentence. Now that's 2 people, so we want a plural pronoun. So they knew it would make Lana happy. And we don't need Lana and then Lana's parents. That's repetitive. So let's do her parents. Now, this paragraph is much, much smoother. Lana and Keegan went to dinner last night with Lana's parents. During dinner, Lana's mother asked Keegan when he was finally going to propose to her daughter. Lana was so embarrassed when her mother did that. She was also a little worried that this question would make Keegan uncomfortable. So imagine Lana's surprise when he answered, tonight, actually. And then Keegan pulled out a ring and proposed. Keegan and Lana's mother had planned the whole thing in advance because they knew it would make Lana happy to have her parents there for the proposal. Much, much smoother. So, one final piece of advice. When you are writing, you need to try to strike a comfortable balance between your use of nouns and your use of pronouns. If you have too many pronouns, it can get confusing for the reader. They might not be able to figure out who the pronoun is referring to. But as you saw, if you go the opposite way and have too many nouns, it can make your writing feel clunky and repetitive and just generally unpleasant. So you want to try to strike a balance. And the best way to check that you've done that is to get in the habit of proofreading. And when you proofread, read your writing aloud to yourself. Now, I know you won't be able to read aloud when you're doing the GED test and writing your extended response. So just in your head, imagine your voice reading aloud as you proofread. It's a little trick. If you're a native English speaker, meaning that you've spoken English your whole life, you will have a certain instinct, and that instinct should kick in and help you. Now, the other way that you get good at this is you just need to get into the habit of reading more and trying to write more. It's like learning to play a sport. The more you practice, the more you do it, the better you get. I hope this lesson has been helpful. In our next lesson, part 4 of the 8 parts of speech, we will be looking at verbs.